Good afternoon, listeners. Today, me and my colleague Muthuraman, both of us would be having the privilege of interviewing the Union Finance Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman. She's been we're grateful to her to have agreed to this interview. We hope to ask questions around infrastructure, startup, digitization, and the challenges of the MSME in the next 30 minutes. I hope all of you are going to enjoy this. Ma'am, ever since at the helm of affairs, you've been there for the last 2-3 years, and especially the thrust on the infrastructure, right? Like starting from the national infrastructure pipeline, and then we had the infrastructure bank, and then we had the national monetization pipeline, then more recently the kind of record allocation on infrastructure expenditure, uh, and of course now with the Gati Shakti as well. So it's been, so we have the vision, we have the policy enablement, and we also have the funding structure in place. But one of the key challenges in infrastructure, continues to be the execution challenge. Especially, you have the interface with the states, uh, and states have to do a lot of heavy lifting. So, is that something? How is the execution challenges being addressed? Because we are putting so much money right now in infrastructure. So, if you could just throw some light on it, ma'am.
You're absolutely right on that concern. Even last year, where we had increased the infrastructure budget from somewhere between from 3.5 lakh crores to 5.54 lakh crores, much depended on the central government's own um, spending,
Budget,
because it was a public expenditure, capital expenditure being the priority, was to be undertaken by us. And in that, whilst all the departments were consulted prior to making the budget, and with them also being a part of the NIP making process, National Infrastructure Pipeline making process, they were all very aware. But it still required a lot of, every now and then, a bit of a nudge. But that's not to say they wouldn't want to do it, but even as all of us were revving to go immediately after the budget, the second wave hit us.
Correct.
And that, I think, was very intense. But the recovery from it, in the sense of mindsets recovering from it, for people to actually go to the ground and get work done, was a bit of a challenge. However, people did come around, but my first quarter was therefore lost, in the sense the amounts which were readied, and the whole idea of the budget having moved from late February to 1st February was that we clear the parliament and the processes and be ready to move the money to the concerned department from the first week of April itself. Could not get served because we were deep into the second wave. Okay, once that sort of receded, even then, because of the intensity, the mindsets were very hesitant. So, in that context, it became a big difficulty, one. And second, gradually, I think there's so much happening out there in the private sector, and also the mindsets in the government, because business is not government's first priority, right? Running businesses, building huge dams and everything else was the business of the government, but it always assumed a long gestation. Now we appreciate it, there are projects which have to take a long gestation, but we also wanted the money spent as much as possible within this year, because that is required in the ground. So there was a slight shift which was required, and not till the middle of the second quarter could we even have that momentum back again pick up. So that was the context then. Omicron was less of a challenge. But the larger point that you're making is right. Government will have to be literally nimble and, move fast. We have also, in a way, worked together with the state governments. The last year's 15,000 crore was a success because states were very keen on it, and they showed that they can deliver. So we also wanted, therefore, to give a considerable portion. We've given about 1 lakh crore to the states. So it will have to be both states and center. And one other little point which I'll add here is, from that national infrastructure pipeline, which has more than 6,000 projects, we have now sort of picked on those projects which, in concurrence with the states, picked up on those projects which we think can be immediately speeded up. Whether they take their 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, they can still move fast. It requires a lot of coordination, it requires a lot of follow-up, and it requires a lot of making sure that the little glitches here and there are all addressed. And we'll do all that.
One follow-up question, ma'am, on this is that if you really look at the infrastructure spend, some sectors of infrastructure, like we are building glittering expressways, highway construction is at a very frenetic pace, airports coming up and all that. But since we are in Bangalore, a city of like say almost right now we are 13 million, there is this perception on urban development if it can be done very differently, right? Like if you really look at the quality of urban life, right, in terms of garbage collection, clean lakes, pathways for pedestrians, stuff like that. So is there, like, you spoke a bit about an urban management philosophy in your budget, and is there like any way in which we can spend better on our cities, which is over and above our traditional devolution actually, because the cities are the turbocharge our growth, like even Bangalore, if you see, almost Karnataka itself 18% nominal growth only on services actually. So our cities are going to be our greatest economic engines. So can we like look at any methods, any thinking on how we have to relook at urbanization, especially around how we spend actually?
Not just especially around how we spend, also the capacities which are required for planning to spend, for items on which you need to spend. Do you need them? Do you need them the way you think you need them? Do you need to have other aspects which are normally not given a priority?
Absolutely.
We talk a lot about waste management, and we create a huge big waste dump, and we think we've done the job. Maybe not. So I'm not getting into specifics. One thing which certainly has occupied our mind was, with the growing population, with many of them young, they are obviously going to start their lives. They would want to have, whether they live in the rural areas or urban areas, we need to have that kind of a facility given. And cities should be proud places to live, where minimum assumptions of good quality living is possible. So we've placed a lot of emphasis in this budget on capacity building for urbanization. Now, urbanization had acquired a kind of not so positive aura. Earlier people thought you don't need to urbanize. In fact, that's a bane of modernization. But today what we are looking when we refer to urbanization is that quality of life which is possible even if you're in the outskirts of cities, but that should be ensured with a consistent good overall planning. I think our urban planning has been building up and down in dips and rises, but also the question of the capacities in the urban local bodies, in the municipalities. Yeah. Now, every time you really cannot have an outsourced agency which doesn't have the flavor of the place to come and give you a wonderful idea which may not be required by citizens there. So we are placing a lot of emphasis. It may not really see a holistic, complete execution within 1 year, but that's what we've placed as one of the important milestones for Amritkal itself. So not that it's going to take 25 full years, but we've recognized the problem, place some money, and also create capacities for it.
Other follow-up question, last one on infrastructure, is that while the relentless focus on infrastructure is really price-worthy, even some well-meaning well-wishers of the government, right, like one thing that they say is that, definitely there is a clear shift from revenue expenditure to capital expenditure, which can't be even denied by the critiques of the government. But one argument, or maybe it's a criticism, is that this kind of shift in the quality of expenditure comes where it's ignoring the here and now. Like, say, there is certainly a bit of economic distress which has led to a tepid consumption, right, actually. So you think how do you address that criticism that not enough has been done on here and now, but we have like a infrastructure is okay, as you said, gestation period, the transformation is over the years. So you think this is a valid criticism, or how does the government look at it actually?
I don't want to say it's an unacceptable criticism. Criticism has its own place, let it be there. But here and now is not ignored. I want to place it here before you. So when we have increased the budget so much for Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, that's not here and now. Also making sure that through the EPFO, when we increased the contribution of the employer and the employee and took that 24% on ourselves, is that not here and now? ECGL is not here and now. So there are enough examples through which I can say here and now is when we are trying to bridge the gap on education.
Right.
Where you had just about 12 to 25 channels, then we raised to 99, and then now it's 200 here and now, because states can be immediately putting Doordarshan to use and education can be attended to. Here and now is again when you're looking at health insurance, when Jan Arogya Yojana itself brings in that kind of a cover for all the poor, where they can go to the hospital and not pay a penny, not put on the table any identity papers, paperless and cashless. That's here and now. So I can give you more such examples. If end of the day the argument is you have not placed money in the hands of the people, immediately for spending. Okay, that's one way of looking at reviving the economy. We've considered various other reasons and thought that the way in which you need to have money reach the hands of the people is through the public expenditure, other than having given the free food grain, other than making sure that emergency help, some money goes in the hands of people, other than paying cash to the farmers and so on. So we've not ignored that.
Other thing is like on the national monetization pipeline, I'm asking this question in the context like we just spoke about how government is currently doing the heavy lifting on the infrastructure, but at some point of time the private players have to jump on into the bandwagon. So you think that the national monetization pipeline would give a good opportunity for private players to participate, and what is the level at which the government preparedness is there in terms of
I think it varies from project to project, state to state. They are located all over the country. And for some states, some are priority. For some other states, a different set of things are priority. Overall, it was, no one knew when the National Infrastructure Pipeline was documented and presented that there will be a COVID. It was early 20, January first week 20 that I had given that out. But after that, states have also come up with more to add to it. So your 6,000 has actually grown.
Correct. More from the monetization pipeline, ability to engage
So when private sectors brought in, they're looking at these projects which they can take up. And for which each of the state government together with the center works in. Now when you're talking of monetization, we have already listed, when I announced it as part of the Aatmanirbhar Bharat, I already listed the various areas in which we can. And many of the public sector undertakings which are sitting with huge land parcels, which are not probably immediately necessary for them, nor is it necessary for the expansion which can happen over the next few decades. We've asked them to identify that. Now even these are going to be obviously available for private sector to see if they can take that up and do something on it. Railways is also joining the monetization thing. So we are working together with private sector in each of the states to see which is going to be of meaning to them.
Muthu, ushering in with the digitization.
You talked about the emergency credit lines. It has worked wonders, as in I think many of the MSMEs have got good relief at that point of time. The counter to that, the credit guarantee scheme, the budget talks about additional 2 lakh crores of credit guarantee for MSMEs. The track record of CGTMSE till about 2018 has been a little poor. 2018 a set of reforms happened and then the amounts have substantially jumped. But even then the claim settlement has been low, as against 2.5 lakh crores of cumulative guarantees, they have settled about 700 crores, less than 1% of the 0.3%. That is in market terms, as in a guarantee fee of 1% or 1.5% will mean roughly around that kind of claims. So the bank's confidence level in these credit guarantee, CGT SME as an institution is not come up to the level that the government would like. Any specific measures or anything that you can do, because Korea, China, etc. have multiple credit guarantee institutions, not just the single one that, as in Vajpayee started very visionary in 2000. It has taken a life of its own and assumed a big number today. But more participation of other players for credit guarantee, is that something the government can think
No,
of?
I agree. There's room to improve on the CGTMS. I have spent some time on it and tried to understand where the execution, especially even during the COVID, when actually people needed the help, could not really take off much to the satisfaction of everybody, much to the not dissatisfaction. I won't say dissatisfaction, much to our surprise that it didn't pick up as much as the ECG.
Exactly. Yeah.
We've gone through it, and we need to see where necessary tweakings will have to be brought in so that it becomes much more attractive.
Okay. Okay. As in allowing other players to enter the sector, is that something that
we'll see?
Yeah, okay.
Maybe we'll have to.
So the budget also made about 6,000 crore allocation towards RAMP for strengthening MSMEs. Could you provide some details? What are the thoughts on that? How
these were actually discussed extensively with the ministry,
okay.
MSME, and they had come up with a lot of suggestions saying A, B, C and so on. So I had agreed to many of the schemes because at that time it was very clear that having had the stakeholders consultation, they will be able to come up with, formulations which will immediately make a difference to them. Okay. What we had formulated was the ECGLS, which I distinctly remember the number of meetings that I've held, and post that having announced it also, the number of weekly meetings I've had with the banks, just so that it
actually reaches this thing, and it has reached. It has definitely worked.
In a way, I feel that is behind many of the program success, because you just see how Prime Minister Modi, even as he was Chief Minister, succeeded in executing many of the programs there, and even now. Okay. Actually, it is a big USP in his administration that from the stage of planning, where he consults the stakeholders and then gets into designing and executing, until the last mile connection, going to the last beneficiary, he monitors it and executes it. Yes. That is one big message on the success of any program. So PM does that, and many of us try to emulate that. Right. And it is that which makes the difference, because after a point, I don't want to say it like this, but nobody owns something. I have to get this done, it's mine. That sense of ownership is what drives you to do things. Many of us try to do it because we've seen that it has borne very good results. We have to do that for every scheme, I suppose.
Yes.
One question, ma'am, since about the execution. I think the PLI scheme, right, was a big theme in your last budget, and it was really wonderful to see that resonates in the current budget as well, right? And maybe at the time when Aatmanirbhar was launched, there was some criticism that it's back to, you were inward looking and all that stuff. Now it's pretty much clear that every big economy in the world is clearly betting on an industrial strategy and all that. From a government's thinking perspective, ma'am, how have these 13 sectors were identified, and do you think that we have a clear vision to through this program to build national champions and kind of deepen the manufacturing expertise? So what is the thinking, and you think like we'll be able to, I think it's almost the recent one, congratulations for the one on semiconductor as well, almost 10 billion, it's as much money that some of the bigger countries have put actually. So how is the thinking, how confident are you of funding it and
it all emanated from those early days when we wanted to ensure that India becomes one other source of getting many of these products made, rather than the world depending on just one. Then we went about looking at which other sectors for which we can give some kind of an incentive so that industries moving out can come to India and settle it. So what could be attractive to them? But equally, we kept three things in mind. One is making sure that it should be such an industry which can scale up fast. Which can scale up fast because you wanted to meet India's own demand, because that's where you found a lot of finished goods coming into India. And you also are able to scale up in such a way that you meet India's demand, simultaneously find also export potentials. One. Second, you also wanted to make sure that that sector, by doing this much, will generate adequate employment. So it has to be that where more and more people can come into the job. There was a little snide remark passed saying, oh, all right, you're only creating people who are going to make assembling of things. Well, we start with that, they can end of the day make
exactly. It
something
doesn't
more. So
happen overnight.
employment was your second what do you call
Objective.
it, priority. So you wanted to keep that production for scaling up, looking at the domestic and export market, and third, that which has the potential for jobs. So we took up these. Equally, we then said not just these three, but a fourth, which will be on those which global market will continue to want to have more come. So semiconductors was one such a thing. Even in India, you're depending on somewhere else. Chips, the shortage of chips, you saw the impact it had on automobile, every other sector. So we said that is also a priority, and therefore now in one of the PLIs, that's also added in. So these were the parameters which were kept in mind when we made a selection.
You're confident of funding it for the next 5 years?
Yes,
That's good.
Okay. Last question on that. Between the budget and now, much has changed in terms of the Ukraine and the oil price, and even the edible oil prices and things like that. Is there any interim relief for the common man, that is as in the Hon'ble? Because much has changed between these this just 1.5 month time.
That's right. Much has changed so much that in fact all of us are literally looking at the impact, and also the forthcoming months and years. I think in a way the global order itself is going to have to completely reset itself for the kind of changes that have happened. And all the more when you're talking of Aatmanirbhar, now you realize the kind of platform or the path that we've adopted is just not wrong. It's not at all wrong.
No, it has been validated.
It has been now not only because the other countries have also chosen to,
take that path.
Yeah, take that path. Now say make in so and so country, make in so and so country for each one of them. I think what we have identified, and I really appreciate the Prime Minister's vision on this, we have identified those critical pain points. If someone else were to control us from elsewhere, what are those points on which we could be absolutely, made breathless?
Exactly, yeah.
And it is on those areas. India's stack has given us a classic example of how we can be so independent, and not just independent, share these things with countries which otherwise would have been just nowhere.
Correct.
So not just our own well-being, but looking at a global leadership role which India has always taken up, and I'm glad for that. COVID was a classic example.
Absolutely.
We were able to share it with them.
Startups.
Yeah. One question on startups.
So on that one particular thing,
yes, please.
Looking at essential oil, looking at crude oil imports, looking at some of the essential food grains or whatever, and also the opportunity that it has created.
Absolutely.
Suddenly we realize that we have such things which we can now sell in the global market, which let us say because of Ukraine's difficulties, it's not able to now serve the market. And these sort of things are both mixed with challenges and opportunities.
Wheat, for example.
As of now, that's right. Wheat, for example, sugar, which is going now. As of now, the challenges seem to outweigh the opportunities. But I'm sure we'll be able to
navigate through this. Actually. Okay. Last question on
being in Bangalore, as in no interview can end without a question on startups. I've seen so many unicorns and
40 unicorns and almost 20 lakh people related to the software. And
so the startup fundraise do have some small hiccups in terms of this thing. Government has been fleet-footed, has been coming out regularly with regulations. But like Mohandas Pai asked, one is on the ESOP taxation, still some reforms are required. And even on the private placement process, the valuation norms, etc., different departments, RBI or IT department and MCA do not see eye on each other. So it creates a lot of operational bottlenecks.
Which are the three you said? RBI,
RBI, MCA and income tax.
Not
for example,
at all. I'm sorry, you're wrong.
I
will say this, you complete yours.
I will
but
just complete my
wait.
question. For example, a unlisted company has to get a valuation certificate. FEMA asks, RBI asks for a category 1 merchant banker or a chartered accountant if the amount is small. MCA doesn't take chartered account certificate, it asks for a registered valuer. Income tax uses only the chartered accountant. So for a small company, if it has to raise a small amount, say 1 crore, 2 crores as an angel investment, then it has to get any two certificates, a registered valuer and a merchant banker, or a registered valuer and a chartered accountant. And all of them have to magically come to the same valuation to avoid paying tax at the time of raising the capital. So we have raised this at the department level, but there is a scope for alignment of.
No, that's fine. But where I want you all to convey is also, after this interview, I'm straight going to a meet where startups are meeting me.
Yes.
And this is not the first time. In my time between 2019 and today, I would have met with startups only in Bangalore at least 4 times.
Okay.
There's never been a hesitation to interact with startups. And there's never been a hesitation since you took the name of Mr. Mohandas Pai accessing us and coming to Delhi and speaking to us, or meeting us here and pounding us with his expectations. We try to match it. Sure. Sometimes we may not be able to match it. Because it's periodically the comparison with Singapore is doing this, so you do it. India has its limitations, may not be able to copy everything that Singapore does. But we'll still make a possibility of making startups feel more welcome, feel more, at home, feel more facilitated. I'll do all that. And I still will tell you, like never before, whether you like it or not, I will have to put this on record and I'll stand by it, whoever may challenge me. Like never before, RBI, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Corporate Affairs have worked together in most of the issues resolving them. Now, if you randomly pick one and tell me because of this,
no.
the three are not working together, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm not confronting you.
Yeah.
I want you to also take up issues in such a way that if there is one outstanding, yes, we'll address it. Or to say there's been discord between the three and therefore I'm sorry. Okay. I would like you to be challenged and I would like you to challenge me on this.
Okay.
Never before the
only on that valuation issue there is an issue.
Today.
I understand.
I'll try to address it tomorrow. Day after you'll have one more. I'll try to address it when it is raised.
That's right.
But to blanket tell me, and I find that a bit of a repetitive thing about startups.
I absolutely agree on
There could not have been a better Prime Minister to handle this issue, and he is the one in 2016 came up with, and after that every year we are attending to it. 100%. And I like to have that kind of energy, but not as an adversary. Sorry.
No. See, the proof is that India has recorded.
No, I'm not taking any claim for that. We need to do it. It's for our startups. It's our people.
Exactly.
But to have one random example thrown
No.
Last one we ended on a good note actually.
This is good note.
We spoke about the physical infrastructure, and the other great thing about the budget was in terms of the focus on digitization, right? Like starting from digital universities to national health stack, every village connected through broadband. I think like your speech had e-passport and of course your even your currency. I just counted, I've never seen it so many digitization related initiatives in the budget. Fantastic. But one criticism is that like all this enablement for it has to be through a digital infrastructure, telecom infrastructure. So there has been some criticism that, instead of looking at it as a public good, promoting a public good, there has been some tendency to even look at it as a revenue, especially on the license spectrum related reasons. Some of this being corrected with the slew of packages did. But from an overall, what do you think the government's philosophy
is? That's not the philosophy at all. Otherwise, do you think, in spite of very clear verdicts from the Supreme Court, the government would have gone and looked at the whole thing all over again? And with due respects to the Honorable Supreme Court, respecting their verdict, we've also come up with a policy-driven approach so that it's not revenue, but it is good competition that you want in the market so that consumers benefit from it. So revenue is not the driving force there. It's more to get more competition so that fairer, better services available for the end consumer. So that's been the principle with which we are going. Yes, revenue is important, but we've not kept that in the foreground on every one of the decisions that we're taking, and on the digital too. That is a way. In fact, I've put money much more than what they can absorb, I would think, this year, in 2 or 3 different areas, saying if they're able to absorb it, let them, because we want them to rapidly digitize.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very
I'm,
much.
really grateful for answering all our questions, and
Not at all.
have a. I think you have to go back to Delhi probably, and like Muthu said, address all those.
No, I'm reaching out to the startups first of all. It is very
Wonderful, ma'am. Best
Thank
wishes.
you
I
very
think
much,
being at the helm of affairs when such
Tumultuous
global
times,
pandemic, and then now there is almost a World War kind of a scenario. I'm sure there's a great challenges, and I'm sure you're going to best wishes for you.
All of us will have to work together.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.